Hey, so this is my video on the ins and outs of working with a recruiter. So let's start from the absolute basics for someone that has never heard of recruitment or what we do. So essentially, what a recruiter does is find you a job. So that's either a permanent job or a freelance booking. And there's ways that we do that. So one way can be that we have an active vacancy. We advertise that either through our websites or LinkedIn or our social media. And then people send their CVs and their portfolios through to us. And then what we do is we cherry pick who we feel is the best fit for the job through the relevant experience that you have on your CV and your portfolio. So when we take a brief from an agency, there's a couple of questions that we ask. So we have the job spec, but we also ask other questions about the wish list of what that client likes to see in a particular person. Now, 50% of that is skill set. The other 50% is personality and attitude. And when we pick up a job from a certain company, we know that there are certain personalities or characters that just seem to be a better match with some agencies than others. It's all about things like culture fit, but also that is mainly down to the client to decide when they meet you for an interview as well. But sometimes they'll say things to us like, we want someone that is incredibly ambitious, that doesn't have an ego, that's a really good team player. So when we speak to people on the phone, not only are we qualifying, when we call you after we've decided your experience is right from your CV and portfolio, we're trying to suss out if you'd be a good creative for us to represent on our books. So the relationship that you have with your recruiter is quite important as well, because we are working with you. Like if I'm ever helping a creative to find a job, I'm trying to find the right match for you, as well as trying to find the right person for my client. So there's the first way in which we have a vacancy, we advertise that, you apply, we approach you, we meet you in person, we qualify if you're right, and then we send your details over to that agency. Now, we will often send sometimes a selection of individuals for the company to pick from. They might like 3 to 5 options from us. So then they can meet with a few people and then assess who might be the right fit. Now, we set up the interview for you, and we will speak to you before the interview as well and give you some information and some background knowledge to that company, and just to make sure that you're as prepared as possible. Preparation is key for interviews. You don't want to go in blind, not knowing who you're meeting and why you're meeting them, okay? So, and as soon as you finish your interview, you usually call us and you let us know your feedback as to how that went. It is essential that you call us immediately, because that says to us that you're quite keen on the job, and then we normally speak to you first and then we call the client and we let them know your feedback. Now, why it's good to speak to you first is often I'll ask a question, which is, so not only how did it go, but on reflection, if there's anything you could have changed about the interview, what would that be? Or if there's any questions that a question you were asked and you didn't answer in a certain way. Now, this gives me a real chance to be quite helpful, because often people know in an interview if there's something that they said that they shouldn't have said, or something that they wish they'd said. And that gives me a chance to go back to the client, and often, 9 times out of 10 you do gauge it right. And I've had situations where someone has said to me, do you know what, Nikki, I was really nervous, but that was because I was so excited. And I can then go back to the client and I can say, they did say to me that they were quite nervous. And often the client will say, oh, actually, yes, they did come across that way. And I can really help in regards to smoothing over the interaction of the relationship. So we set up that interview for you, we get the feedback, and then we set up hopefully another one. And we're there all the way, kind of guiding you. A good recruiter will know the status of the job as well. We'll know how many other people are being interviewed. We'll know what stage the company's at in a way that you won't necessarily know if you're going yourself directly. You're a bit more in the dark, and we help you in regards to your salary and expectations. We can have very difficult conversations with potential agencies about the money side, which not a lot of creative people feel comfortable discussing. Now, we know what our clients' budgets are because they tell us. So when we are advising you on salary, it is it's not only what you're looking for, but what the client's looking to pay. Now, salary is very important because sometimes if there's, candidate A and candidate B, and they are identical, and one is asking for more money than the other, unfortunately, the client, if you're both identical and there's one deal breaker, they may go for the person that's asking for a lower salary. So we can really help with the whole process and give you information. And of course, if you do get to the final stage of the interview, we will manage your offer. So the client will call us and they will offer the salary, and then we go back to you, and you can use us to, if you want to hardball and say, do you know what, Nikki, I'm not happy with that salary. Do you think we can push back? And I can gauge quite easily from the client room where we can perhaps ask for a bit more and maneuver, and where we can't. So that can be quite helpful sometimes in regards to making sure that you ask for a bit more, but you might not ruin your chances of getting the job. That's a real fine balance as part of the final stage process to securing a job as well. But as I said, we are also your cheerleaders. So if we really know you and you work with us and you're honest and say, Nikki, I'm interviewing with this agency, but I've also got interviews with 5 other competitors. That's good to know, because actually that makes you more desirable to that client. It's always the way. If they think there's a demand for you, then that will create even more urgency and curiosity. So then we will let our client know that you have other interviews lined up with their competitors. And if you get offers with multiple agencies, job offers, then that can really help if you want to ask for more money from another agency. Now, you've got to be careful here, because yes, if you are in demand, there is a chance that with anything that's supply and demand, the price can go up, which would be your salary. But you've got to be careful, because there is a fine way that you play that, where you're not being seen as greedy and unreasonable, and then that might be a red flag to that agency to not take you on. So that's where a recruiter can help you, is to guide you, really, and that's what we're for. Now, there are some recruiters out there that are better than others. We all know that recruitment as a word gets bad press. Trust me, I've been in the industry nearly 9 years, okay? The amount of calls I've had to deal with where I've picked up a client that's had a bad experience with a recruiter, and I've tried to manage that with them. Now, these are the recruiter red flags. Flag number 1, they don't meet you in person or over Zoom or have a proper call with you. They're not engaging with you as a human. And how can they match you appropriately to a job if they're not willing to actually meet you? Red flag number 2 is when they call you about a job, they won't tell you the company's name. Don't let any recruiter get away with that. You need to know where your details are being sent, because they could be sent to any agency out there in London, and you need to know what inbox your CV and your portfolio is going to. So if a recruiter calls you and they give you a description of a job and they are vague and they don't say who it's with, demand, in a nice way, of course, you don't want to be aggressive, but say to them, I need to know where you're sending me. It's really important for me to keep a record, because what can happen is you might then say be working with one recruiter, and then you start working with me, and then I will say to you, where have you been sent? And what can happen sometimes is I will call you about an agency. You'll get all excited. You haven't been sent there before. I'll get excited. I'll send you details over. And then the client says, we've already had this candidate CV and portfolio through another recruiter. Now that can cause a problem, because unfortunately then it becomes a very unnecessary, difficult conversation where both myself and the recruiter are trying to represent you for the same company. I try to avoid that. It's not very professional. So I always say to creators, get the recruiter to send you a list of where they've sent your details. So that's a massive red flag as well. Now, one real top tip that I want to give you in regards to working with a recruiter is it's up to you to chase your recruiter for feedback and your status of the application, because often we can be very busy, and with all the will in the world of us trying to get back to everyone, it's up to you to check in with me and say, hey Nikki, how's it going? I'm really keen on that job. Have you had any feedback yet? Okay. Touching base once a week. Now, I do try to get back to everyone that I work with as much as possible, but I do really appreciate it when people just call me. I'm old school. I love the phone. When they just call me up and say, hey Nikki, how's it going? I just want to find out some feedback. It might be I've just got off the phone to that client that day and I haven't at that moment in time managed to call you because something else has popped up, and then you call me and then I can give you feedback straight away. So it's got to be a real mutual relationship. A big no, and this should be a no-brainer, but unfortunately, because some recruiters have a bad name, that means certain individuals feel that makes them entitled to be quite rude to recruiters. I don't really have it that often. It's very, very rare I have it nowadays, especially since setting up Nikki Lyle Creative. Most of you are bloody lovely to me and I don't ever have that. But I would just say it's a sign of bad character if you're rude to internal recruiters or agency recruiters or just anyone in any point of the process. Even if you're frustrated, you never know when you might come across that person again in the future. And it's never cool to be that person on LinkedIn that's ranting as a keyboard warrior about recruiters either, because would you want to work with someone that was criticizing graphic designers? So that's one thing that I'd be very mindful of as well, that unfortunately some people fall into the trap of that in LinkedIn. So as I've just explained, there's the job route where we advertise a job, you apply to that. There can be another thing, which is where we know you are so perfect for an agency or our client that's not hiring. So we do something called speculative, where we will call up that agency and say, I have the perfect designer for you. Trust me, when you've briefed me in the past, they tick this, this, and this box. Would you like to meet with them? So we can sometimes create opportunities for you in agencies that aren't actively hiring. I've done that before, where I've just known someone spot on and that agency has been in a position to hire someone when they weren't looking. Now, in this current climate, that's unlikely, but that can happen. So that's the second way that we do it, which is speculative. So that's permanent recruitment. There's also freelance. So how that works is we'll have an agency approach us and say, hey, Nikki, I need a freelance graphic designer. Can you find me someone? And then I'll often have known you for 9 years, or I will put a shout out on LinkedIn and then people will apply to me. Now, when you write your emails to recruiters, it's so important to make sure in the subject header you put who you are: graphic designer, branding, packaging, motion. Because what happens, not just for me as an agency recruiter, but internal recruiters do this. We'll do inbox searches sometimes in our emails, and we'll type in those skill codes. So say I was working a copywriter role with beauty experience, and I'd write copywriter beauty. And then anyone that's ever sent me an email saying they had that experience will come up. So that's a really important thing to remember when you are emailing your details to someone, agency side or client side, is making sure you list all your skills actually in the email itself, so that you come up. You know, if you use 3ds Max, if you use Cinema 4D or anything like that, pop that in your email. Now, when you are applying or approaching recruiters, this is a massive, massive top tip. Don't write essays, okay? Just don't do it, because imagine yourself when you receive an email, lots of text is so off-putting. So you're better off saying, "Hi Nikki, my name is Joe Blogs. I am a middleweight graphic designer with experience in branding and packaging. I also have skills in Cinema 4D. I have one." If you have one like a D&AD pencil or etc., and just list like what you're looking for, and keep it brief. So maybe like a few sentences. But what's quite off-putting is when people email me lots of text, not just me, but internal recruiters, because you're basically saying to us, we want to take up your time to read an essay about me. And you need to be very considerate of people's time. It's a very fast-paced world, and think how you feel when like brands approach you or companies approach you and it's too text heavy. So really be mindful of that in your applications and your approach. So that's the in and outs of working with a recruiter. So also, how do we get paid? You don't pay us, the company does. So we're paid a percentage of your basic salary. So whatever your salary is, we'll have a fee that will be pre-approved with the client. So that's how it works. I hope that's answered anyone's questions about recruitment and what it's like to work with a recruiter. Good luck with your job search, everyone, and stay tuned for more videos.